Well, welcome everybody to the webinar today titled Misconceptions and Best Practices for Material Pricing. My name is Derek Delaquadri and I am the Director of Marketing for Vision InfoSoft, and I've been here since 2001. I also have two other people here with me, Brian Hoffelder, who is our estimating and training consultant as well as our software development manager, and he's been with us since 1993. And many of you have probably spoken with him as well. Carlyle Poole is our software support manager. He's been with us since 1995, and before he joined us, he was with Trade Service for 5 years, and before that, he was with Wesco for 4 years. So I'd like to welcome them both. You guys want to say hello to everybody real quick? Go ahead, Carlyle.
Hello, hello everyone. This is Carlyle.
Hi, this is Brian. How's everybody doing?
All right. And so we can't hear you, our webinar viewers here, but there is a questions box there. If you see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a red arrow probably pointing to the left. If you click on that, it'll open up the control panel for this webinar. And one of the modules there is titled Questions. So you can type your anonymous question there, and I'll get them and be sure I pass them on along to Brian and Carlyle to answer during this webinar. And to start things off here, I have a couple polls, kind of interactive polls for you to do a little, not really a test, but to give us an idea of where everybody's understanding is on pricing. So I'm going to launch.
Derek, got to interrupt you a minute.
Go ahead.
Should we be seeing the PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, it would be nice if I showed my screen. Sorry,
there we go.
Everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the, we only missed one slide here. It was the first one, just to, now I'll jump on over to the pricing poll. Thanks, Brian. All right, so the first one is regarding the, what is the price of half-inch EMT, and you should have 4 options there. And if you could just click on one with your mouse, we really don't know what everybody's answering. It's more about just seeing what the average is. And I'll be sharing the results of the polls towards the end of the webinar. All right, so we're getting some answers here. About half of you have voted so far. All right, got some varied answers, but it looks like there's a clear favorite on this one. Gonna wait a couple more seconds here to see if there's anyone else that wants to vote. 77% have voted. All right, I'm going to close that one, and I'm going to jump into this one. See if this one's... So this is a new poll question. There's 4 of these. We'll go through these really quickly and jump into what we're doing here. So this one's number 12, THHN copper wire, stranded. Again, it looks like we have a clear favorite, and I'll be sharing these results at the end of the webinar. Okay, all right, we've just got one more vote. There's another one. Just a couple more seconds. And I'm going to close this one. All right, excellent. And the third one is a 20 amp commercial specification. What was it, Brian? Specification grade duplex receptacle, a CR20.
Specification grade or spec grade is often the term.
All right, you guys are getting used to this now. You guys are firing the answers in quick on this one. So one more after this, and then we'll move along.
So what's the prize for getting all of them right, Derek?
Pride? All right, looks like we got some extra. Again, we have a clear favorite, but it looks like it's interesting. The number 3 will be interesting to see the results later. Now we're going to move on to the next and final. An Intermatic T2006 time clock.
Is there any more information on that, Brian? Like, is it a double pull?
Nope, that's just the catalog number.
Uh,
I could have put more information there, I didn't.
It's trying to be tricky.
Double pull, double
So
throw.
it is a little bit of an unfair question. I can see that point. But nonetheless.
Got to go by your gut on that one, I guess, huh?
Yep.
Well, looks like our webinar attendees know their stuff. I'll just say that. All right, looks like we got them all. I'm going to wait one more second. Oh, 81% of you voted. Good job. All right. I'm closing that one out. And let's see, now I'm going to move on and turn it over to Brian to kind of cover our pricing misconceptions that we'd like to cover. Go ahead, Brian.
All right. I got a list here of some things that I think are, to some extent, some the misconceptions that I've seen over the years in talking with contractors about pricing. We're going to talk about these in a little more detail as we go through some of the discussion here today, but I just wanted to introduce the misconceptions I've seen. One of them is that prices don't change very often. Now, we all know that commodity prices change, almost daily, if not by the hour sometimes when it comes to wire and copper and even conduit to some extent. Certainly, those change all the time. But I think there's a misconception that the rest of the stuff, all the other things we deal with on a regular basis, don't change that often. Just to give you a little statistic, in our Epic pricing service, our price updating service, we'll talk about that a little bit later, we have a total of about 2 million items in the pricing service, and roughly 250,000 items change every month. Now that's a lot of turnover. Now most of those prices are going up. Some of them are going up and down when it comes to the commodities, but roughly 250,000 price changes a month. Another misconception sometimes is that pricing from your distributor is competitive. We make the assumption that since we live in this competitive environment in the construction industry, through all the way from the distributor to the contractor, that the distributor is always competitive. We'll talk about some exceptions to that. Another misconception is about copper pricing. We all know that commodities like copper are volatile. But when commodity prices change, the direction and more so the speed of the impact is not a known quantity. We'll talk a little more about that, but you will see copper prices sometimes shoot through the roof, and wire prices may or may not react, especially on the downward side. I think that's where we really see the delayed reaction. When copper prices drop, the wire prices sometimes react very slowly. This is one of my favorite. Pricing is regional. Almost every contractor I've spoken to over the years has the assumption that the prices in their part of the country are unique. And it's usually the perception that their prices are lower than everywhere else in the country because they see the competitive nature of the business. They see how wholesalers fight for their business, etc. But for the most part, we monitor prices all over the country, and there is very little regional variation in pricing. It does not mean that the distributor across the street from the other one is more competitive than the other. That does definitely exist. But if you look at prices in Southern California or Colorado or Florida, etc., they're pretty much the same. The really significant exception to that is if you're in a remote area. Let's face it, if you're 100 miles from the nearest distributor and you've only got one distributor within 100 miles, your price is not going to be as competitive as an area where you've got several to choose from and they're constantly competing for your business. The other kind of opposite situation is if the distributor has an office or a location in a real expensive, maybe a downtown area. They've got to pass that cost on. Now, you may still do business with them because you need the convenience of buying in that particular area sometimes, but for the most part, pricing is not regional. And the last one is an interesting one that I think I may get some challenges on this, but pricing is not entirely dependent on the size or the purchasing volume of the contractor. One of the things I see very consistently is that small contractors who spend the time have the knowledge and know how to negotiate and when to negotiate with their suppliers can get very good pricing. We'll talk about some of the tools that help you negotiate and be a better purchasing, do better purchasing of your materials. But don't make the assumption that just because you're a small shop that you can't get very, very competitive prices. Okay. I think we're ready for the next one. I mentioned Epic, our pricing service. We have a pricing service that updates about 2 million electrical items. Primarily the people that use that service are using our estimating program or another estimating program. That pricing service has the option of being updated quarterly, monthly, weekly, and with the commodities they can even have them updated daily. Three of the terms that we use in the pricing industry, which we use in the Epic program, are trade, target, and custom pricing. So I want to define those so when you're talking to your suppliers, talking to other people in the industry at least, you know what our definition of these terms is. The trade price is a price that is published by the manufacturer. So whether it's Leviton or Square D or Steel City or Rayco or Thomas & Betts, they all publish pricing. So it's basically defined as the suggested wholesale price, and it's at a price that's available to pretty much anybody that wants to get it. If you want to take the time to call the manufacturer and ask them for a price list, that's what you'll get. If you go onto Leviton's website, that's what you'll get as the trade price. Now the target price is what we publish, what we give to contractors as an indication of an average of what contractors are paying. So it's a price that's based on sampling all over the country. In some cases it is zoned to specific regions, but for the most part it's an average across the country. So it gives you a target, a benchmark. We'll be using that term benchmark a little more later today too, of what contractors are buying for. And I think that's one of the most important things to know when you're purchasing. What is the average? You know, how can you make a decision about whether you're getting a good price or not if you don't have something to compare it to? And finally, custom pricing. Custom pricing is an option where you can actually incorporate, download, and see the prices of one or more of your local distributors in Epic. So in addition to seeing the trade price, the target price, you can also see the price from one of your local wholesalers to see how that compares, see if they're doing a little better, a little worse than the target price. But you can see it right there on your screen. You can incorporate that into your estimating, your billing, your purchasing, and if you have those three prices, you're really going to be a much more intelligent and effective at your purchasing.
Hey Brian, I have a question here.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to, and Carlyle, I don't know if you want to answer it now or wait for it, but the question is, how can we help you improve the consistency and accuracy of pricing we receive through Epic? We use your target price, and many times the pricing seems to be nowhere near what we actually pay for items.
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, and actually what happens when we've definitely encouraged people to report discrepancies. Carla's going to tell a little story about this later, but I would say at least 90% of the time when we have discrepancies reported, it's because the local supplier is out of line. And it goes both ways. Sometimes they're way high, sometimes they're way low, but again, at least 90% of the time when we get these discrepancies reported, we go look just to do a double check at our data, our sampling, and rarely do we find that our average is offline. Now, sometimes there's a big spread, and that's something, you know, you can't account for, or you can't do anything about. You may see a 20, 30, 40% spread, even more from the top to the low end of the pricing. The average is still the average. It's the best number to go from, but that doesn't mean that because somebody's 20% below or 20% above that average that they're totally out of line. It just means that they're above or below the average.
Yeah, it depends on the item, but that average might be a wide spread. But still, we really want to know what folks are, for any item that you see that might be mispriced, We really want to know what you're seeing out there as far as prices go. We have what we believe are some real life prices that we're collecting information on a daily basis, but you know, if any of those look like there's some discrepancies, we encourage people to give us a call or fax or send an email and say, hey, take a look at this item. I'm buying it for, you know, this price, and you guys have it listed, you know, for something totally different. Because you know, we just have a lot of different sources, but the more sources, the better.
All right. Thanks, Brian and Carlyle. I say we move along here with Brian.
Okay, these are some of the strategies or the practices that I see contractors using on a regular basis for their pricing. You know, this first one sounds a little bit sarcastic, I suppose it is. You know, trusting your distributors to give you the lowest possible price. And in reality, that's what most contractors do. They develop relationships with suppliers. They develop those relationships based usually initially on their competitiveness. They've come through with some good prices. So you tend to develop and just assume that pricing is going to be maintained as far as being competitive over the years. So you do develop a trust in your distributors. You have to some extent, but that's also something you want to re-examine and look at at least once in a while. Another strategy is to send a list of materials out for pricing to several distributors every time you want to make a purchase, whether it's a list of material that you're buying out for a contract job or for a service job. One way to monitor pricing is to send that list of material that you need to purchase out to every supplier or to several suppliers or distributors that you want to get pricing from. That's a tedious process, obviously, but it's one of the things that's done commonly in the industry. This next one is one of my favorites. I don't know how many times I've asked contractors, do you check the prices on your invoices? And almost always they come back and say, sure, I checked them. That's how I catch most of the price mistakes. The problem there, the issue is, what are you checking it against? And most of the time, honestly, people are checking against the price they have in their head. That's the reason we did this little poll at the beginning, is that you kind of develop a history of pricing. You kind of have an idea where some of the more common items, a couple of those items we did on the poll were very common items, and you probably did very well on the poll. But how do you check the other stuff? How do you check the other several hundred, several thousand items that you purchase when you don't have a price in your head? It's good to have some kind of a benchmark to check that against, or you're vulnerable to the mercy of the distributor being honest, competitive, whichever way you want to look at it. So that's why the next strategy has become a fairly common practice in the industry over the years, is to use a standardized published national pricing. Now, going back a ways to the printed publications, the only thing you got in the printed publication was the trade price, the published price. And I'd still argue that's better than nothing, but today with products like Epic, you can actually see what the average price is. Still, it's not a perfect solution, but it's better than having no benchmark at all. And I've kind of referred to the next one, getting pricing electronically from distributors. That's what we call custom pricing. Many distributors today will send you current pricing on the items that they stock. We incorporate that into Epic as what we call custom pricing, so you can sit there on the screen and look at the custom price, the target price, and the trade price and see how they compare. It's all done electronically these days with the use of UPC, Uniform Product Codes. Virtually everything in the electrical industry has a unique UPC number. It's something we can download electronically and incorporate into your pricing. Okay.
All right. I have a question.
We're ready for the next one.
I have a question first.
Okay.
Someone asked, how to set up local pricing in Epic, which I believe is the custom pricing that you referred to earlier.
That is okay. I'll take the first part of this, Carlyle, but basically the first place to start is to contact your wholesaler. Now, it isn't unusual that the person you contact is your outside salesperson or maybe even your counter salesperson, and they may not be the person that is going to be able to help you. Maybe I'll let you take it from there, Carlyle, on what they actually need to obtain.
Well, we have a custom price file layout that we will send to the user's supplier. Actually, we can just email it to the user, and they can distribute it to whoever they want. Maybe you have a list of distributors that you want to get pricing from, and it's usually a pretty simple layout for the distributor to follow. They all have a way of downloading your pricing to a file. It's really just a text file that we load into Epic. And once it's in the correct format, and we'll help them with that format too. A lot of times we'll get distributors to send us their prices, and they'll say, hey, can you put this in the Epic format so that ABC Electric can use it? And we'll do that for them. But anyway, once we have, once you, the user, have the custom price file from the distributor, it's just a matter of importing that to Epic, and it will find, based on the UPC numbers, it'll find all the items that are matched in Epic that you purchase from the wholesaler, and then apply your price to that item, and it'll just appear as a separate price column. If you buy from Joe's Electric Supply House, it'll show Joe's prices right next to the target price or the trade price. And then once that's in there, then depending on the estimating software you're using, you might be able to actually import that to your estimating or billing program and use it in there as well.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Carlyle and Brian. I think that I have another one. Let me see. How do we get the format to send to our suppliers? I think you may have answered that. But
yeah, what we do is you just give us a call and you say, hey, can you email? We email it out to folks all the time, and so we'll just email it. And if you're an Epic user, there's no additional charge for it. It's just part of your subscription. We help you import custom pricing, and then you can have your favorite distributor call us on your behalf if they have questions about the price file layout. I talk to distributors all the time about what kind of information needs to be in there. But it's really basic. Most of these guys have a IT person in-house that handles all their technical issues like this, and so it's usually pretty easy for them. Just have them give us a call and we'll help them with it.
I think just to add to that, Carlyle, too, that today most distributors are familiar with this process. It's more of a challenge just to get to the right person, and then a lot of them even post it online. There are distributors now that that post the price file online, so you log in with the password and all that, and you can actually download it 24/7 too. So that's one way that the custom prices are distributed.
Yeah.
all right, perfect. I wanted to add something real quick. I noticed that we had some latecomers come into the webinar, and I just wanted to mention that we are recording the webinar, and we will be sending an email out shortly after, later today or early tomorrow, with a link to it for those that missed the beginning and would like to catch it again. All right, let's move along.
Okay, there's really two facets of your business where pricing comes into play. I'm going to talk first about estimating, then I'll pass it back to Carlyle to talk about purchasing. Obviously, pricing is important when you're doing an estimate because you have to have accurate pricing and you have to have competitive pricing. It's a pretty straightforward issue. If you don't have competitive pricing, you're not going to get your fair share of the work. If you have pricing that is too low, then you're going to lose money because you underpriced your material. In general, estimating comes down to a couple of approaches that incorporate pricing in different manner. Eventually, you really have to know how much material costs if you're going to do a legitimate estimate. If you don't know the price of the items that are in your estimate, you're really not going to be able to produce an accurate estimate. Now, a couple of methods of estimating that kind of get around this and have their own weaknesses are what we call unit pricing and even pricing by the cost per foot. there are electrical contractors, electrical estimators who price projects by the foot. Yeah, and if you're looking at a residential bid and you've done X number, several hundred residential estimates, and based on just the square footage of the house, you can come up with a pretty good estimate just based on history. So it's not a totally useless strategy or way to do estimating, but it's not something you can use when the projects have a lot more complexity and variability. So unit pricing is a little more sophisticated. Unit pricing is kind of a all-in-one approach where you come up with a unit price for a 2x4 lay-in fixture, for a recessed downlight, for an exit light, et cetera, et cetera. But those prices are based on some pretty broad averages. So again, it's not the most accurate way to do estimating. One of the examples I've seen over the years is people that use unit pricing and try to apply it in certain situations. They end up eventually overbidding on some projects and underbidding on others. How you come up with the list of material is a whole different subject we've tackled on some other webinars about estimating, because there's different ways to come up with a material list. But ultimately, you want to have a fairly accurate list of materials that are needed for the job and be able to apply accurate pricing to each of those. Do we want to go back to purchasing for a minute, Carlyle, or do you want to?
Well, I'll wait till you're done actually here.
Okay.
That's all right. I mean, if you overlap a little bit, that's okay.
Let me just take the next little topic just for a second here. Another story I've just ran across recently working with a contractor whose strategy was basically to price out the common commodities, the conduit and wire, on a job-by-job basis, and they were just kind of ignoring the pricing of the rest of their materials. They were just assuming that the prices didn't change that often. So when they went back to review some estimates, they were trying to find out why they weren't pricing material accurately, why their material pricing was always under budget. Well, they hadn't updated their prices in 2 or 3 years. They were updating the commodities and thought that was taking care of it. But in reality, it didn't. They were getting hurt on a lot of the other materials that they weren't keeping up to date on. They're not as obvious. They don't jump out at you, but they do add up over the years. So like I said, there's 250,000 price changes a month. Most of those are not commodities. There are other things like plates and boxes and receptacles and switches and that kind of stuff. So you've got to have that benchmark. You've got to have something to use that's updated and relatively accurate. Okay.
You ready to go on to purchasing, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, Brian talked earlier a little bit about the trade price, and just to expand on that a little bit more, that manufacturer's trade price, it's a published price from the manufacturer, and I like to think of it of, in fact, I know what it is that the supplier, the manufacturer is giving the supplier a suggested price to sell their products. They're saying, hey, you the distributor, if you want to stock our items, here's what we think you should sell those items for. So the manufacturers are hoping that trade price is what the contractor will pay for their items. But of course, to get your business, the distributor is going to discount those items a certain amount, depending on the items, quite a bit. And so that's what we show as the target price. That target price in Epic is the discounted price off of trade. And it's a good idea to know what that trade price is. Obviously the target price is something that hopefully will be what you can expect to pay, or close to what your costs are, but that trade price tells you a lot of times what kind of discount you're getting from your supplier if you have the current trade prices that we provide in Epic. There's I'll talk a little bit about a particular customer that, and this is actually a story that has come up before a few times, but I just want to give you an example of why it's a good idea to keep track of not only the target prices, or what your costs are, but also the trade price in relation. And then we'll talk a little bit about custom pricing in a second. But I had a recent conversation with an Epic user who was kind of in that mode that Brian just described, where he basically just trusted the pricing that he was getting from his favorite supply house on the we'll just call them common items. They're not commodity items. They're not items that traditionally are believed to change quite a bit. He was just every once in a while checking invoices. He had Epic there. He was updating Epic, but he just basically was trusting his favorite supply house, his favorite distributor, until he noticed a couple of items on an invoice from his distributor that just seemed to be way high. And his first thing was to check it against Epic, and saw that the price was quite a bit higher than what we were showing for our target price, the price he was getting from his distributor. He called us to find out why, but while he was waiting for a callback, he also called a few other distributors in the area. And by the time I got back to him, he had already decided that the Epic target price was in line with 2 or 3 other distributors he had in the area, but the distributor he normally buys from, his favorite distributor, was way high. And he had checked a few other items also. By the time I'd gotten back to him, he had a list of items that, and our conversation was just basically, okay, now what is it? Why do you think this particular distributor is pricing so high for these items? And there's a number of reasons why that might happen. Brian mentioned earlier about the purchasing volume and things like that, but basically what it boils down to is a matter of when you get in a mode when you're trusting that a distributor is going to give you the correct price, that doesn't always happen. And it could have been some mistakes on their part. It could have just simply been that they decided, without letting him know, that his purchase volume didn't warrant the kind of pricing that he was used to, and so they just bumped up the prices without letting him know. And he was paying his bills and just had started to notice it. But who knows how long they were charging him some of those things. But anyway, long story short, he was in the mode when we got hung up that he was going to call them and get some answers from them on it. And that's kind of the way you want to do. You want to be checking your pricing. If you got a benchmark to look at like Epic, you can check that against your invoicing and see whether or not your distributors are providing the pricing that you agreed to. And when we talk about custom pricing, a lot of times folks will use that. Custom pricing is basically the deal sheets that you would get from your supply house. If you're familiar with that term, deal sheet, it's when you go in and you'll negotiate pricing for things that you buy commonly, and you can say, hey, for the next 6 months, I intend to purchase this list of items from you. These are the items I typically buy from you, and you're talking to your distributor here. For the next 6 months or a year or however long, I intend to buy these items, and what kind of prices can you give me for these items? And so they'll provide a deal sheet, and you guys can negotiate back and forth based on a volume or type of services that you normally expect from your distributor. The pricing you agree to pay for the materials, and that's what they create that custom price file from, and those are going to be your actual costs. Again, you're checking those against the Epic trade and target prices. If they're giving you trade prices on a deal sheet that they provided, they didn't really give you that much. They didn't give you the deal that they, I guess, agreed upon. Very few people will pay the manufacturer's trade price as a cost. You know, you always expect a discounted price. So anyway, just wrapping this up, when you're purchasing materials, you know, having a benchmark like Epic, you know, is just a good idea. Knowing what that current trade price for those items are. And then, of course, knowing what the target prices are gives you an average. And it is a national average, but as Brian explained earlier, it's not something that's, what we found, it's not something that's a regional price. Those prices do not change significantly on a regional basis. There truly is a national average that most people can use.
Let me throw in just one more little story. I work on site a lot of the times with contractors when I'm doing my software training, and if I get the opportunity, one of the things I really enjoy doing is having them do some price checking. I'll have them just randomly pull invoices out. One of the situations I remember very clearly was just a few months ago with a relatively large electrical contractor here in Southern California. I think at least in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 employees in the field, who was doing most of their purchasing from one of the very largest wholesalers here in Southern California. And we started looking at pricing, and it was actually almost uncomfortable because the pricing they were paying on everything except commodities was significantly higher than the target price. I mean, in the neighborhood of 20–30% higher than the target price. I know that led to some phone calls and follow-up on their end, but they just, you know, they've been working with the supplier, they get good service, but that was just too much to pay for that on a daily basis, to be paying prices that were just not competitive. So it's something you got to do. You got to check the prices, you've got to have something to check it against. So are we going back to the poll, Derek?
Yeah, I think it's time for the great reveal. All right. Sorry, Carlyle. For some reason, I was getting some echo from Carlyle, so I muted him. I'll bring it back, Carlyle. I'll bring it back. All right. So let's go back to the poll results. So I'll start with number 1. Here, sharing it now. So you should see the poll results, which was for the half-inch EMT.
That's real interesting. I like. This is kind of what I would expected, Derek, as far as the results. Most people got it right, a little over half. The target price in Epic right now is just a little bit under $19 per 100 feet. But significant answers above and below that. One of the things that happens with conduit pricing, we talked about this in here, is that conduit is typically priced per 100 foot. So sometimes when they see a price per foot, it doesn't register. Sometimes on an invoice it'll appear as a price per foot. Typically conduit is priced per 100 feet, and that answer of $19 is where you should be close to.
Yep, so B was correct. And sorry, here's Carl. Did you have anything to add, or?
I only caught part of that, but yeah, I think most people, they seem to have a pretty good feel of where half-inch EMT is.
Yeah.
But, you know, like Brian was mentioning, it'll move on them, and they don't realize it sometimes.
All right, we'll move on to the next one here. And let's hide that one. Number 2.
Again, the majority were correct on this one.
Huh?
That answer C might explain again the unit of measure problem. Sometimes people purchase wire by the 500-foot roll or the 250-foot roll. So again, sometimes they don't really know the price per thousand that may be the published price or the price that they see on an invoice. You got to convert that price to a price per thousand to really know what the price is. So, you know, almost 30% of the people didn't know relatively closely what they're paying for number 12 wire. Now that is the most common size of wire in the industry.
That's true,
so
30%.
Everybody purchases every day.
Yep, 30%. Okay. Can I jump to the next one?
Again, most of them are right. That's a little better than expected, Derek. Again, that's a very common item, but again, I see a fairly wide range of pricing on that. I might see people that are buying it for 90 cents. I might see people that are paying $2 or $3 for that same item. And also we get into a definition of terminology. Now, commercial spec grade means commercial spec grade. It doesn't mean industrial grade. It doesn't mean premium grade. It doesn't mean hospital grade. But again, if you're not watching the terminology and the exact item that you're buying, you could get a little bit off track in your price checking.
All right.
Everybody guessed on that one. That's good. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now the final one.
Okay. Carlyle pointed out, this is probably a little bit unfair because I didn't give any other definition to the time clock. But a time clock is what I consider one of those things that you just don't want to guess on. Whether you do an estimate, whether you're checking an invoice, how do you know what a time clock costs? There are $20 time clocks, there are $200 time clocks, there are $1,000 time clocks. If you don't have something to check it against, you don't know whether you're getting charged the trade price or a good average discount. The $175 is actually the trade price in that item. That's roughly the trade price. $125 is much more realistic, and most people figured that out, but you can see it's not an easy question. You know, unless you've got something to look it up in, you could easily have that slip through in the when you're purchasing it.
Carlyle, anything to add to those?
Well, it could be that, you know, our list of attendees today were kind of preaching to the choir as far as just folks who probably are serious about pricing and, you know, using all the sources available. But you know, like Brian was saying, just you know, the time clock is a good example. You know, you have to really kind of double check things if you can really get yourself in trouble if you just kind of trust what the supplier or the distributor's giving you for a price.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So I think...
Go ahead and flip to that last slide,
yeah.
Derek.
Here you go, Brian. Oh, you know what? I didn't hide the... there we go.
I think one of the points I wanted to get across today is that pricing is one of those things that just tends to get pushed down the priority list in your everyday business. There are obviously time constraints in running a business. Sometimes you just don't have time to shop around. Sometimes it's hard to make time to check prices, to monitor pricing, to make sure you're getting competitive pricing. But it's just, there are good tools out there today. This age of computers and data across the internet and emailing and that, we can put that information at your fingertips. You can become a better purchasing, you can become better at purchasing with the electronic software and tools that are available. But you've got to have a benchmark to compare to, and you just can't be too complacent about it. It's something that with a little bit of effort you can really improve the profitability and the level of pricing that you're getting. Unless there's any more questions, I think.
All right, so
to wrap up here.
Yep, I believe so. There was a question just asking about. Actually, there's a couple of them that are coming in now. One stating that they have 4 distributors that they work with, and they feel that the lighting in Epic is coming out significantly higher than what they're experiencing from their distributors. And just looking for our feedback. That might be an after webinar type call situation. But
yeah, although I would like to look into that a little bit more, so maybe you can direct that question to me, Derek. But
yep.
That wouldn't surprise me with lighting. Lighting is one of those things that there are a lot of standard light fixtures, but there's a whole lot more light fixtures that are really, you know, almost unique to the manufacturer or the specific jobs that they're bidding. It's why most of the time lighting is an item that's quoted for a particular job. So to get good average pricing is not that easy. And the manufacturers who make light fixtures don't publish pricing on their entire product line. You take a manufacturer like Hubbell or Leviton, they publish every wiring device that they make. You go to Lithonia or Metalux or et cetera, especially the smaller lighting manufacturers. They just don't publish pricing to the extent and to the degree that the other manufacturers do. So that partly due to limited data. We don't get as much sampling or as much input on lighting pricing.
Okay, and how about, I'm going to try to stick on subject. Someone was asking about classes, any classes in the Northeast area coming up. Advanced classes, I should say.
We have classes on all of our programs coming up in Newark in the, I believe it's the second week of November. You can check our website. It's got the published dates. We typically go to at least one city a month to do classes. We do introductory classes and advanced classes. And one of the things we cover in the classes is Epic, how to set up custom pricing, how to look up prices in Epic, what the trade price is, what the target price is, and how that all interfaces to the estimating and the billing programs too. So that's all incorporated into our classes we do. So as far as Northeast and Newark, New Jersey is going to be the second week of November. Again, you can get the specific dates off the website or give us a call, and we'll tell you what else other locations are up. But all the locations are shown on the VisionInfoSoft.com website.
Under the training.
Yep.
Or support, I believe it is actually. Okay, and I've got some differing, what would you call it, responses to what you said, Brian, about the lighting. The original question asker said something, he said that Epic is lower on standard lighting, and then someone else said that lamps, ballasts are usually targeted at twice what we pay, while 4-inch J-box are about 3 times what we pay. Just some examples.
Again, we'd really like to see some specific examples there. I think a lot of the time we'll find the same type of story that Carlyle found, is that when we start looking at specific items and that kind of thing, we'll find an explanation.
And the last question I have is, what is the best method to use for pricing with T&M? Should Epic be used across the board? Question.
I think what I find today most is that people use the target price and mark up from that in the time material program. Now, going back over the years, people used to use the trade price. The problem with the trade price is that some manufacturers publish prices that are literally 5 to 10 times what the contractor buys for. So the target price is more consistent. If you want to have a consistency to your pricing, if you're concerned that the customer is going to be looking at your pricing pretty closely, and you want to be consistent, you probably should mark out from the target price. So both are used, though. It's not uncommon to find either one.
All right. That about covers it for the questions. We have some people offering to send in their price discrepancies, and I told them to email support@visioninfosoft.com.
Great.
Carlyle, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that sounds good. Have them send them in. We'll have people who are looking at this stuff constantly, so they'll appreciate it.
Excellent. All right. Well, let me see here. So now we're concluding here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We got about 40 people here in attendance today. And we did record this session, and we'll be sharing it on our website, and you should receive an email with information about that when it is available. You can always contact us by phone, which you should see on your screen, and of course visiting our website for information about our software or future training or how to get in touch with us. We've also been working hard on developing what we're calling a Learn Estimating Resource Center that can be found on our website, and we're adding content to it every other day, I'd say, or at least weekly on slow weeks. But anything ranging from best practices to avoiding pitfalls to pricing strategies and other news that's going on in the industry and with our company and software. So again, I thank you everybody for joining us. Brian?
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and
Thanks,
Carlyle.
Derek.
Yep, no problem. Signing off.